What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Fantasy Files podcast, where we talk about our favorite fantasy series and topics. We are your co-hosts, Spencer and Gabe, and today we are continuing our discussion of Deadbeat by Jim Butcher. We'll be talking about a couple other facets of the book. Also, it helps the channel a lot when you hit those like and subscribe buttons. So if you've enjoyed this content, please consider supporting us in that way. You can also follow us on Twitter at Files Fantasy to keep up with us there. But let's get back into this book and talk about the next couple topics here. All right, let's talk about this magic system. Something I wanted to just point out real quick is that Mab calls mortal technology ferromancy, which I thought was super funny.
Yes.
Because ferromancy is magic that manipulates iron and steel. And so she said something like, "Your human ferromancy that you call technology."
Yep.
I really like that. What did you think of the necromancy in this book? Like all these zombies and all the different powers at play.
Yep. So I've always enjoyed seeing the other side of the magic, the side that is frowned upon, that is punishable by death, basically just black magic, dark magic.
Right.
And so I was really especially this reread, I was very enamored with the way that Jim put it together and made it work. And there's certain, requirements that have to be met, right? Like you have to keep the beat. The beat is what keeps the zombies attached to you, not keeps them alive, but it's what keeps them under your will and stuff like that. And seeing how that's implemented further on. And then not only just like, well, I guess that is necromantic energy, like raising the dead, but there's other things like we see, for instance, Kumori like revives a dead person with necromancy.
Yeah.
And things like that. So I think that there's a lot more to it than just like, because you think of necromancy, it's like magic of the dead, right? And she even talks about it a little bit, but I think that there's more potential there. Obviously, it's illegal, so it probably won't ever get reached. But so it was cool to see that side. And yeah, that's really all I got about it.
Yeah, I think I really liked the necromancy on this reread. I don't think I ever paid too much attention to it before.
Yeah.
But going through this time, especially the whole thing with Kumori, Harry even has this moment where maybe necromancy isn't as like dark as I thought. Like maybe it's not strictly black magic. Maybe there's a little bit of gray wiggle room. Like he even himself performs when he raises up Sue.
Yeah.
And he's like, maybe this could have some potential if you do it correctly.
Yep.
And so Kumori is trying to end death forever. Like she's trying to completely stop death so that everyone will live forever. And Harry brings up a couple good points. He's like, what if you had like an immortal Hitler or a immortal like Saddam Hussein or something? And so, there's definitely those kind of implications to think about. But yeah, I really hope that in future books we can get even more like necromancy and finding out what its possibilities really are. Like you said, the beat doesn't the beat doesn't keep the zombie alive, but it keeps them contained to your will.
Yeah.
And so even Harry says, like, he's telling Butters, if you stop the beat on the drum, then this dinosaur is just going to go crazy and kill everything. And then I won't be able to control her anymore. Something some logistics of necromancy that I thought was pretty cool on this reread is that humans leave a larger metaphysical imprint when they die than animals. Because Butters is asking, like, why doesn't somebody just raise up like 100 wolves or
Yeah.
thousands and thousands of rats or something? And the thing is, they're just not as powerful.
Yeah.
But something like Sue, the dinosaur, it's such a large creature, not only physically but also metaphysically. It has a lot associated with it. It has, like, there are movies made about the Tyrannosaurus Rex, and there's lore about them and archaeology and all these things. It just has a lot of like spiritual significance. And so he was able to put a lot more power into this dinosaur. And so I thought that was a pretty cool distinction. The more energy you are able to pour into something, the stronger it is. And older corpses have a bigger footprint than newer corpses. They are harder to call up, but they're stronger. And so, like, we see Gravane at the beginning of the book, and he's got some newer corpses that he probably just got on the way to go get Butters.
Yeah, brand new one. I mean, he slit his throat right there and then raised him
Oh
from the dead
yeah,
immediately.
Phil.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Phil.
the security guard.
Yep.
Um, yeah, and so he's, just to go get someone like Butters, he's using these fresh corpses that he doesn't need to be very strong. But then as we get towards the end of the book, we see him have these incredibly strong zombies that have been dead for, probably over 100 years,
Yeah.
like they were from like a burial ground or something. Um, and so that was kind of cool to see the logistics of necromancy.
Yep.
What did you think of this big Dark Hollow ritual?
Oh man, it was crazy, dude. It was so much more crazier this book, or this reread, I should say,
Yeah,
too. Because I understood more of the premise and the potential that it could give somebody or have. Um,
right.
and so I mean, basically, what it is it's a work. It's like a basically a rite of ascension almost, into godhood.
Yes.
It's kind of the way that he describes it, and they soak up. So they cause all this fear and pain or whatever else across the whole city, and then they basically like manifest it into one big swirling cloud and soak everything up. And there's a bunch of spirits that get sucked into it. It actually sucks the life, out of people that are nearby and within the radius. And then it comes
Right.
down, and whoever swallows it is like a demigod. Like, so even
Right.
even even Mabs tells Harry, she's like, if this Dark Hallow goes through, it will be more power than this world has seen in millennia past, like so much time. And I was like,
Yeah.
dude, that's thinking about the scope of that is like crazy. Like
Yeah.
if like Cal were to get away with that, like it would be nuts, absolutely crazy. I mean, it'd be like game over almost. You can't really defeat that. And so I thought that
Right.
part was really cool, and I thought it left a good edge to the fact that like Harry had to stop it, like because I was so suspensed out. I was like, he's like, how is he? He's got to stop it. Like he's got to do this. He's gonna do this. Like he has to stop this. It's so important to stop, and whatnot.
Right.
So I really enjoyed that, and I thought it was a great way to end the book with that whole thing and how it ended and Sue and all that was just that's one of the main reasons why this book is on my top of the list.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the thing that is so cool about that is, at first they like hex the city and all the
Yeah.
lights are going out, and Harry and Thomas, or I think it was Harry and Thomas who were talking, and they were trying to figure out, like, why are all the lights going out? Is it just because of this working that's going on? But then they figure out that hexing the whole city, all the lights going down at one time, and all the riots and everything, it creates this turbulence of
Yeah.
emotion and this panic and this fear. And they're able to tap into that along with all of the dead spirits nearby. They're able to
Yep.
tap into all the ghosts and stuff to power their Dark Hallow. They're trying to summon the Earl King because he's a very powerful hunter spirit,
Yep.
so that they can trap him in the Dark Hollow. And so I thought that was really cool, like how how this is made. And now also Harry knows how to do the Dark Hallow.
Yes, that's the very
So
ending. The very ending.
yes,
Yes, that's one of my favorite parts of this entire book, along with all
yes,
that stuff. But that dude, when he puts her in her place, like so
yeah,
swiftly and so perfectly, I'm just like, yes, dude, yes.
yes. Oh my God. Yeah, that got a huge smile from me.
Yep.
And it's, you know, it'll come up later in the books
I hope
that
so. Yeah.
this is an option for him. This is
Yeah.
like using this Dark Hallow. If he ever gets into a tight bind, he knows how to do it. And so, you know, there's a couple times later in the books where he is considering using the Dark
Yep.
Hallow. And you know, luckily Harry is a good person, and
Yep.
he makes that choice with, you know, wisdom.
Yep. We can
Um,
talk.
oh, sorry, real quick.
I was just gonna say we can talk about another aspect of that. Well, it's I wouldn't call it magic. I mean, it's part of the wizard I guess body you could say. But you know, Harry's hand was burned so badly in
Yeah,
it was the last book, right? The one right before this. And so I mean, his hand is torched, like scarred skin. His fingers are curled up and whatnot. And with that, Butters is kind of doing like some, I guess, not really physical therapy, but he's looking at it and checking it out, and he's managed to get some X-rays from Harry and whatnot. You know, 10% of the 50 that he took came out and whatnot. Um, and Butters notices and comes to the conclusion that that wizards can replicate their cells perfectly, whereas people, like, you know, you replicate a cell, but it's not as good as the original. And if you
right.
hurt that cell again, then it's not as good as the last two. And so you slowly dwindle down this like scale, and that's why, you know, arthritis and stuff like that, like people get sore and tired and hurt on a scale that they can't recover from it. But he notices that
Right.
wizards, and he notices that like they have perfect cell replication, basically. Like they can heal from
Yeah.
anything given enough time. And so that was a cool part of this too, like seeing, and just the fact that like Harry gets the excitement of like knowing like my hand can get fixed, like my hand will get better. Like it was all the hope
Yeah.
that he needed to power through and do all that. So that was another cool part.
Yeah, that was a great moment where, you know, Harry takes off his glove and he's kind of looking at his hand, and Butters looks up at him. He's like, "Yeah, I think you're going to get your hand back."
Yeah.
And it was just this really, really cool moment. And you know, it also explains the wizard's lifespan,
Yeah.
that, you know, our, like you said, our cells are replicating and replicating and replicating, and it's a copy of a copy.
Yeah.
And it's doing that our entire lives. But if our cells could replicate perfectly, it makes total sense why your lifespan would be like 600 or 800 years.
Yep.
So yeah, I thought, you know, partially magic system, but also partially kind of world building in a way.
Yep.
It explains why wizards are able to sustain the way they are.
Yeah.
They do make a point of saying that Harry probably won't heal any faster, but he will heal better.
Completely. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Or completely, I guess, given enough time. It might take 100 years, but even then
right.
he'd get there.
Um, yeah, so I think that's a super cool part of just kind of the magic system for human wizards. Um, okay, was there any other magical stuff in this book that was new? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, so I would say that I wouldn't call it magical per se. It is because of a magical item, but you know, Harry gets introduced to Last Shield
Yes.
in such a way that is, you know, at first it's Sheila and she's messing with him and tricking him, and eventually he finds out, but the mind manipulation that Last Shield is capable of, I would call that in part with the magic system, because she like
Yeah.
she has she can completely trick Harry. At least she could. I think that now she's in her cage and she's locked down and kind of they have an agreement of what will work. But I would call that probably part of the magic system, in my opinion. That, you know, she's a very powerful entity, right? And she's just a shadow of herself, and she's constantly trying to nudge Harry, like, "Come on, I can help you. I can do this. We can do this." and tricking him. And that Spencer texted me the other day and he's like, man, it's so crazy reading this now when you already know like who Sheila is, you know?
Yeah.
And then I read it too and I was going through it and I was like, it is pretty wild because like reading it, you are so like sure. Like you don't notice the
Yeah.
things that Harry gets to at the end. You don't notice that she doesn't open doors. You don't notice that she doesn't touch the book, you know, and things like
Right.
that. And so I don't know. That was just kind of a fun thing to go through again and just kind of, you know, knowing in my head like what it is and trying to notice the little faults that I could see before, you know, he, you know, brought him out to see him.
Right.
Yep.
Totally. Or even when Harry goes to when he goes to like a box bookshop
Yeah.
and
And
he comes in the door and and Box like, hey Harry, and Harry's like, hey, just here to talk, and like
yep.
nods towards Sheila, and Box like, the
Yeah.
hell are you talking
Yeah.
about?
Yeah.
Like, and
It's like,
Harry just goes off and talks to himself.
yep.
I love that.
Yeah, I did too.
Um, so speaking of Harry, let's talk about some of our characters here
Yep.
and what is happening with them in this book, to kind of continue along that same line of thought with Sheila and Lashiel.
Yep.
Talking about Harry, people are scared of Harry during this book
Yeah.
because he is doing things like talking to himself. He seems a little bit off, and Billy notices that something is off about him, and he even mentions like, ever since last year or whatever, you've been acting weird, which is when Harry touched the coin.
Yeah.
Or no, it was sorry, that was in Death Mass, and he must have been referencing like two years ago or
Yep.
whatever.
I think that's what he said, or I think that's what they said too, anyways.
And so it was so cool to see that kind of come back around after going through blood rites and not really seeing too much about the coin. She was being pretty quiet until, you know, here where she like has a reason to, she has a way to talk to him.
Well, so I'm gonna interject just for a second on that.
Yeah.
And so she could not communicate with him the way she did until he summoned Hellfire on his own.
That's right.
Yeah. So
yes.
So that was a critical point in where she could finally manifest herself in such a way that it wasn't so like it wasn't so distant, I guess, if that
Yeah.
works. Yeah.
Absolutely. I forgot about that. Yeah, Harry uses Hellfire on purpose for the first time in this book. And yeah, that's, you know, one thing I really love about these books is that everything comes down to choices, and like it's a really big theme throughout all of these books. Probably one of the main themes is that everything that you do and don't do come down to a personal choice. And we'll see that get explored a lot in Proven Guilty and White Knight. But you know, Harry made a definite choice to use Hellfire.
Yeah.
And because of that act of will, that let Lash off the chain, basically.
Yep.
And you know, once he purposely makes that choice to interact with this power from the fallen angel, she's kind of like, well, it's on you now. You made the choice to use this magic. Like, you know, it was happening involuntarily before, but she's like, you know, you chose to do this, so now you get me.
Yep.
And I really like the idea of that it really does, you know, as unfair as this seems to Harry, and as, you know, kind of spontaneous, I guess, but like just so out of nowhere that, you know, and unfair how he touches this coin and he's stuck with this fallen angel. You know, he decided, he knew this power was dark, and he decided to interact with it.
Yep.
And now he's paying the consequences.
That's right. Yes.
So, what did you think of kind of the beginning of this book, and further on into it, where for the first time pretty much ever, or at least in a dozen years or so, Harry is really learning what it means to have a family and
Yeah.
how to adapt with his brother there. Do you have any thoughts on that situation?
No, I mean, just as you said, it was a, it was a pretty big learning curve, I think, for Harry. And mind you, Thomas was kind of like, he mentions like he's hungry and he's kind of got a little bit of an attitude and he's got these women over and forgets to do stuff. And Harry gets home and he's like, dude, what the heck? Like, you're living
Yeah,
here, like, do this stuff. And that's like typical, like, if I were to invite my brother to come stay at my house, like shit like that would happen. Like, you know what I
right.
mean? Like, it's just part of it. And so I think
100%.
Harry understanding more, learning more, because he does learn more about his brother. Um, but yeah, instances like that where he gets a glimpse into the way that Thomas works and the way that he kind of tries to drive himself forward, is good. And he does, like, the progression of the book. He slowly gets more and more like open and more understanding and more realizing, like, you know what, he's got a tough time too, like. And so that's super cool, because at the beginning he's like, what the fuck, why aren't you doing this? Like, I told you to go get the groceries and feed the dog, and you're not doing anything. You're just fucking this chick in the back room. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
stuff like that. But yeah.
Yeah, I think I really liked the intro to this book where all that happens, because you know at the end of Blood Rights we kind of get this scene where Thomas has just moved in,
Yes.
and Harry is kind of having this surreal moment, like, oh my god, like I have a family.
Yeah.
Like I have a brother that I never thought I would ever have. Like, I've never had family before, since my dad died,
Yep.
like real blood family. And and then he's kind of like, they've got this dog, and they're both trying to care for this dog, and they're both living in his apartment. And it's kind of this surreal, pleasant moment. And then to go straight from that's like the very last scene of
Yeah.
Blood Rights. And then the very first scene of Deadbeat is him just absolutely hating life with his
Yeah. Yeah.
brother.
Yep.
Um, and so this book is really where Harry starts to learn about the give and the take
Yeah.
with having a brother. And I think that kind of progresses over the next few books, and he does not get good at being a brother for quite a while.
Yeah.
Like, there's a few books that go by until Harry like really understands Thomas,
Yeah.
and really, like, he immediately considers him very close, and they are immediately bonded.
Yeah.
They are immediately family, but
Yep.
it's not for a while until Harry really lets down all his barriers. Thomas lets down all his barriers,
Yeah.
and they really come together and understand each other. And so it was really fun kind of seeing the beginning of where that started. And I think that's one of my favorite, like, familial, like, relationships in fantasy is these two, and seeing how they interact with each other. I've I have a adopted brother, and he's the same age as me, and he was adopted when we were both in high school, and we lived in the same room for a couple years
Yeah.
before we graduated high school. And so many of the kind of back and forth between Thomas and Harry remind me so much of that.
Yeah.
And so it always puts a smile on my face to see their interactions and just how they're growing together.
Yep.
What do you think? Do you think is Harry and Thomas similar at all to you and your brother?
Yeah, I would say yes when we were younger. Because my brother's 3 years younger than I am, so I'm 24, he'd be 21 now. But back when I was, like 14 and he was 11, things like that would happen. Nowadays, of course, I moved out. I don't really see him a whole bunch, but there was definitely
Right.
times where it was exactly like that. And I also remember like trying to, my mom would, we'd get in a fight or I'd be yelling or whatever else at my brother, and my mom would come to me and she's like, you need to try and understand where he's coming from. And I think that's what Harry does. Like he starts to
Right.
understand where he's coming from. And so there were times where I could do that, and of course times where I couldn't, and it was just game on, let's brawl, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I would say yes. In a time past, I could definitely relate to the way that they are figuring each other out and kind of feeling out how this is going to work and whatnot.
Right on.
Yep.
Um, so so moving on a little bit, Guard says something pretty
Oh yeah,
interesting
yeah, yeah.
about Harry. This is right after the whole thing at Box Bookshop.
Yep.
By the way, did you notice Box Bookshop is Bach ordered books, like back ordered books?
Oh no, I never I never made
Isn't
that
that
connection.
so weird?
I never made it. I never made it. That's funny though.
Yeah, I never realized the connection
Yeah.
until this reread. I'm like, oh, back ordered books.
Oh,
That's
that's
cool.
hilarious.
Um, so so after the big fight at Bach ordered books, Harry is very hurt. And Marcone kind of sweeps in and pulls him into the car and stuff. And Guard says to him, it was his fate to die in that alley. There will be consequences.
Yeah.
Um, and so this is an interesting little bit of foreshadowing. And I honestly don't know if we've seen these consequences play out yet, because we see a lot of her kind of death predictions in later books. I'm going to
Yeah.
leave it at that.
Yep.
And it's really interesting whenever she says something like this, because usually it's like dead on. And so it's kind of like, what consequences can we expect from this? If he was supposed to die in that alley, what is that going to do as far as metaphysically, or it probably even spun off like an alternate reality.
Yeah,
And I bet we're gonna see some consequences for that, if he was supposed to die there and didn't.
for sure.
So also this whole book, Harry is unable to use fire magic because of the events of Blood Rites. And I thought this was a pretty interesting thing for them to do, for Jim to do in this book, because I probably could have even put this in with the magic system, but in order to use magic, you have to be super, super, super confident that it'll work.
You have to just
And
wholeheartedly believe it. Like it is true. Like there's no question. It is there and it's gonna happen.
right. And you have to have like this unshakable faith that not only it can happen, but that it should happen.
Yeah.
And after Harry going through so much pain, getting his hand basically burned down to nothing,
Yeah.
he is scared to use fire magic.
Yeah.
Like he no longer believes that he should use fire magic. And so this is a really interesting example of how those things play into the magic system,
Yeah.
because he's not able to use fire magic this whole book. But then at the very end, after all the events of the books, he's sitting down at a desk or something and just absent-mindedly goes flick'em-bickus
Yeah.
and lights all his candles. And it's like, and then he realizes like, oh my God, I can use fire
Yeah.
magic again. And it's just such a wonderful way to wrap up this book,
Yeah.
with that last scene of him lighting these candles. And it just shows like it's almost like a perfect wrap up for like the season of a TV show,
Yeah, yeah,
like when something just ends on that note that kind of
perfectly.
calls back to the beginning of
Yep.
the season or something. And I just really, I really, really liked the way that ended. And also speaking, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna add a little bit to that. I want to say when the moment when he realizes, like he fully realizes, he goes through this process in his head, like because the zombies are trying to break in the door, and Thomas is like, Great Wall of Fire would do it. That would certainly help us get out of here. And Harry like
Yeah.
thinks on this level that's like very, very primal, and he's like, he's thinking about, he's like, I don't like. Let me just say that it was profound. Like, at least to me, it was
Yeah.
very profound when he finally
Yeah.
accepts and like says it out loud that he cannot. I physically can't. I don't believe that I could do it. Like that was like a very, very powerful moment coming from Harry, who's like the badass wizard that can do frickin'
Right.
everything. You know what I mean? So that I just wanted to add a little bit to that. To the rest
Yeah.
of that.
100%. And he even turns to Thomas and says something like, I'm not at my best right now. Like I
Yeah.
can't do
Yep.
that. And Thomas is just kind of like,
All right. Well,
okay,
we're gonna
well then
die.
we're
Yeah.
pretty screwed. I don't know what
Yeah.
we're gonna do.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I really liked how that was worked into the book. Um, Speaking of Thomas, let's talk about him. You were going to mention earlier the scene with him on the beach with Harry, right? Is that what you
Yep.
were referring
Yep.
to?
That's what I was referring to. Correct. Do you want me to talk about it?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, sweet. So I think Harry notices that has kind of like an attitude, or he's short-sighted, or he's not willing to share and whatnot. And Harry's gets ready to go for a run, and he asks Thomas, is like, you want to go for a run on the beach? He's like, sure. Get out to the beach. And Thomas is, well, actually, maybe you can help me with this. Harry asks him in the car, like, what's wrong, right? And he's not willing to talk, or is that later?
Yeah, no, he asks him
Or like, what's up
yeah,
with you?
yeah, so Thomas is kind of acting weird. Then they get into a run, and Harry is asking him, what's it like? Because Thomas is saying like, oh, I didn't really feed on that girl. That was nothing.
Okay, yeah,
And
yeah,
and Harry's like, what do you mean it was nothing? Like you fed on her, and he's
yeah,
like, it's not what you think it is.
yeah.
So yeah, do you want to take it from
Yeah,
there?
yeah, yeah. And so then with that said, uh, Thomas looks to Harry and he says, "Race me to the car, and I will tell you what it feels like. I'll tell you how I'm feeling." And so
Right.
they're running and they're like knocking each other down and kicking sand in each other's faces and just like dead sprinting and whatnot. Harry's like almost out of breath, like gonna pass out from exertion. They finally make it to the car. Harry's fumbling with his keys. He's like, "Oh, I can't breathe. I gotta get my key in here." He gets his key in there. He grabs a water bottle, takes one big glorious sip, and it feels so good. And then he takes another little sip, and Thomas swats the thing out of his hand. And he looks
Yeah.
at Harry and he says, "That's what it feels like. That's
Yeah.
what it feels like to feed like that." And dude, I get
Exactly.
chills like thinking about it. Like
Yeah.
it's wild, dude. It's so wild.
It is such a perfect way
Yes.
to explain how that all works. And again, I talked about this a little bit last week, but it is a perfect analogy for
Yeah.
addiction.
Yep. Yep.
Um, and I think that this is such a good way to explain to somebody like what addiction is like, and why one dose or one hit or whatever just is never enough,
Yeah.
because it really really is like
Yep.
this.
Yep.
um, I have this quote from this moment down below, where Harry's talking, obviously, and he says, I stood there. This is after he
Squats the water bottle
yeah,
out
I
of his,
think so.
yeah.
Let me
Okay.
see. Yeah, yeah. So Harry says, I stood there trying to ignore my thirst. It was all but impossible to do so. I imagined living with that discomfort and pain hour after hour, day after day,
Yeah.
knowing that all I had to do was pick up a vessel filled with what I needed and empty it to make me feel whole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude. Dude.
And yeah, and That's right after, Thomas,
Yeah,
he hits the water bottle. And then he says, what you said, he says, it's like that.
yeah,
It's exactly like that.
yeah.
And dude, it honestly, like, it made me tear up a little
Oh,
bit.
same here, dude. I
I
was
I
I
was
was
like,
crying, and I will tell everybody that it made me cry for
yeah,
sure.
I was like, man, yeah, that really is exactly what it's like. And so I don't know if Jim is trying to like make this kind of an allegory for addiction, but I would
Yeah,
bet you that he is, because it's so on point.
yeah.
Yeah, I
Well,
I really I really love those moments.
yep, and then you have to think that the vampire courts, I mean, that's kind of, they are addicted to the things that they need to survive, right? Because like
Right.
Thomas needs to feed on the sexual energy or the life force of people to survive, and that's like you said, that's what addicts do. Like they need their drug to survive, or that's what their brain tells them. Like no matter what, like that's what has to happen. So I think I
Right.
would totally agree. I think that it's right on the money for that, and I would not be surprised if it is a direct allegory to that kind of thing.
Exactly. Um, did anything else happen with Thomas? He got lost, right? He took
Yeah.
Murphy's bike
Yep. So he took
and the,
Murphy's
the bike
bike.
broke down.
It broke down exactly, and then did he show up at the end? Like, did Harry get him back? Okay, so he made it back
Yeah.
after the fight was done and whatnot. But yeah, so that's kind of interesting. Um,
Yeah.
and other than that, there wasn't a lot. Like he did. I appreciated the fact that he was willing to protect Butters, and also
Yeah.
I appreciated the fact that he was willing to try and show Harry that Butters, at the time, Butters he was a
A
disaster waiting to
coward.
happen, coward.
Yeah.
And he says that. He's like, he's gonna freeze up, you're gonna have to protect him, and we're gonna die because of it, type thing, right?
Right.
So I appreciated his honesty there, because Harry was too wrapped up in his friendship thing, like to see that. And it all,
Yeah.
it worked out for the best in the end. But other than that, probably not for Thomas. That just the stuff that poked out at me was mostly the stuff with Butters, and kind of how he dealt with that and dealt with Harry, and in those situations when like the zombies were trying to get in and they were trying to get out and
Right.
whatnot.
Well, speaking of Butters, he's our next character I have here. Butters thought that Harry and Thomas were gay,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that was super
yeah.
funny.
That was super
Um,
funny. And then not only
it's
that, but Thomas like comes over, like he thinks he's gay, and Thomas comes over to Harry and he's like, "Here you go, honey."
kisses his
Kisses him
head.
on the head
Yeah.
and gives him a cup of tea. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. And this
Mhm.
is not the first time in the books where people think that Thomas and Harry are
Yeah.
gay.
Yep.
So it's super funny. So we get introduced to or no, we've seen Butters before, but we get a
Yeah.
lot more of Butters
Yeah.
in this book. He has never been a favorite character of mine. Where do you fall on Butters?
So I would probably tend to agree with you on that. I wouldn't say he's my favorite. I think, and I'm not gonna say anything about it, but later on, towards towards the later books and further on, I really see him grow as a character, and I learned to like him, love him a lot more than I do now, I guess.
Hmm.
But I do want to say that within that, as like much as he's not up there in my ranking, even in this book, the growth that he has is pretty incredible. He goes
Yeah,
from this kind of very terrified Emmy, he's a wussy, like scared of everything, like I just want to curl up and die, to eventually like saving Harry's life, and like from Gervain, right? Like he like tackles him and mouse and everything. And so that was cool. But with that said though, he's not very high up there on my list, but I do appreciate him as a character.
yeah. I think it was interesting to have him in this book and have him learn about the kind of magical world, because Butters comes in handy a lot
For sure.
in
Yep.
in later books, especially with his like patching up wounds and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yep.
He's kind of Harry's doctor in a way. I like him for the purpose that he's made for, right? Like
Yeah.
the person that's there to like, patch Harry up and,
Yep.
kind of be the kind of be the person that everybody is like explaining stuff to, and
Yeah.
therefore explaining it to the reader.
Yep. Yep.
So I like him for that. I also like this whole polka thing.
Yeah.
His whole like polka outfit. I think
Yeah.
that's super funny.
Yep.
Yeah, I love the whole like just weird polka stuff that he's
For sure.
into.
Yeah. Polka will never die.
Polka will never die.
Polka will never die.
Yeah, he has a couple moments in this book where he does something really cool where, you know, Harry is getting torn apart by Cassius, and
Yeah.
Butters comes in out of nowhere and like tackles him.
Yep.
And it's those kind of moments where we see a little bit of courage from him. And that was like a huge character moment for him too, because like you just said, Thomas had this talk with Harry about he's a coward. Like he really is, you know, and he even admits it. He's like, I would way rather just stay safely at Murphy's house or whatever
Yep.
than go out on all this
Yeah.
adventuring, I guess. And so yeah, we do see a lot of growth from him this book. What do you think about Cowl and Kumori? You know, you've don't use any like specific examples as to why, but having read the entire series, who do you think Cowl and Kumori are?
Oh, oh gosh. I was not expecting that question. Um, how specific can I be?
You can use character names. We've pretty much met everybody that they could be.
Okay, see, the problem, part of me wants to think that like Cal is like somebody similar, like on the council. Then again, I don't know how that lines up great. And honestly, Komori, like I don't know. Like I don't know who I could fit her as, at least a female in that. But I do think that they are both part of, or at least have some ties with the council, the white or
Yes.
the gray council, or whatever, the black, whatever,
The black council.
council. Yeah,
Yeah.
and so I think that is probably true for the both of them.
Yeah.
That's as far as I'll go because I'll ruin shit if I keep talking.
Okay. Yeah, I think you know, Jim Butcher said that if Harry ever learned who Kumori was, that it would hurt him deeply.
Oh, see, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And so it's got to be somebody that Harry knows. I think both of these people are people that Harry knows, because
Yeah.
he mentions that Cowl seems familiar.
Yes,
that
yes, and
his voice seems
same with
familiar.
Komori too, right? Like he
Yeah.
says that their mannerisms and everything seems familiar. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that Cowl is Kemmler,
Okay.
and that Kemmler, you know, we see this is going to go into some deep theory shit, but
That's fine.
We see that Corpse Taker is able to body hop, right?
Yeah. Copious
and Corpse Taker is a apprentice of Kemmler.
Yeah.
So who do you think taught her to do that, or him, or whatever Corpse Taker is?
That makes sense.
So what if, and it's mentioned in this book, that Kemmler, Justin Dumorn, and the rest of the council did basically a raid on Kemmler.
Yeah.
And that's where Justin got Bob the Skull.
Yep.
And so the question is, how did Justin know to grab the skull? How would he possibly know that Bob is what he is?
Wow, dude, you're making me think really hard right now. Holy crap.
So my theory is, and I'm sure this is many other people's theories too. I've talked about it a lot on Reddit with people, but think about this.
Yep.
Justin Dumorn and the council go to raid Kemmler. During the attack, Kemmler kills Justin Dumorn and then body swaps.
What?
Justin Dumorn goes and grabs Bob. Everybody kills Kemmler because now Justin is in his body. And he he's in a state where he's been either significantly wounded or something, and he's completely disoriented from being in Kemmler's body. And so he can't, because Kemmler is supposed to be like one of the greatest sorcerers that ever lived.
Yeah.
Or that is, in a recent era.
Yeah.
So
dude,
how did the council kill him? It would only be because it was Justin in his body and he was completely disoriented. So they kill Kemmler. Justin Dumorn walks away from that encounter with Kemmler inside him. Now Kemmler is taking over Justin Dumorn. And I can't remember exactly where this falls in the timeline, if Harry was already Justin's student by this point. But Kemmler goes back to Justin's house. He trains Harry in incredibly brutal ways, tries to enthrall Harry, and then Harry essentially kills him, and then Harry takes Bob the Skull. But what if somehow Harry... Okay, this is going to get deep. What if Harry didn't... either one of two things. Either Harry didn't completely kill Justin Dumorn or Kemmler, and then he body swapped someone else, and then body swapped again, and now he's in Cowl's body, right? Whoever Cowl is. And so, or what if Harry didn't actually kill Justin Dumorn's body and he was able to get out of there, and it is Justin Dumorn's body underneath the cowl?
Whoa.
And what's funny is Jim Butcher has gone on record saying, he said to a room full of people on multiple occasions, he's like, no, Justin Dumorn is dead. He's as dead as you can possibly be. That would make sense if Justin Dumorn had been body swapped into Kemmler's body and then was killed. Justin Dumorn would be dead, like dead.
Oh,
but dude, right?
Dude, I have never thought about that, and you are blowing my mind right now. Like, quite literally blowing my mind. Holy crap, dude.
Isn't that nuts?
That's crazy. I've never ever thought about that like that. Dude, I'm questioning my entire life right now.
Right?
What the heck, dude?
I am like pretty sure that's what's going on.
Dude, and then, that's crazy.
So then the question is, who is Kumori?
Yeah.
Now, when we get flashbacks to in Summer Night, we get some kind of flashbacks or Harry reminiscing on the fact that Justin had completely enthralled her. It said Justin's completely enthralled her, or Kemmler maybe. Yep. And she tries to help him enthrall Harry.
Wait, who's
right?
she? Who's she? You're talking about
Elaine.
Susan?
Elaine.
Oh, Elaine. Okay,
yeah. And so Harry breaks free of that, but there's nothing that says that Elaine was no longer enthralled, especially if Kemmler Justin walked away from that. His spell would still be active. So what if Elaine is still enthralled and she is Kumori?
Dude,
and then this whole time she hasn't been spending as much time in the Fae as we think she has, but she's been learning more from Justin or Kemmler about necromancy to become Kumori.
Oh my God.
Right?
Oh my God, dude. I'm gonna freak out, dude. If you keep talking, I'm gonna freak out. Holy crap, dude. I've never gone
Yeah.
so far as that. That's freaking crazy. You're making me question the entire series right now.
Right?
What the heck, dude?
Isn't that
That's
awesome?
so crazy, dude. That's so crazy. But it's
And
crazy. It's crazy, but at the same time, like I could see it. Like
right?
I can picture that.
It all makes sense. And I think yeah, I think even if it isn't right, I think that it's going to be two people that are very close to
Yeah, for
Dresden.
sure. For sure.
And this is what I love about the series, man, is these kind of theories, after reading through a couple times, you can just kind of collect little bits of information and kind of come to it on your own. Now, this theory has been talked to death on Reddit, but I did come to it myself just by reading.
Nice.
And so that's and I'm not like that's not like a humble brag or anything.
No, I know.
I'm saying like that's what is so great about these books is that everything is laid out to the point where if you reread enough times, you can pick up on these little things and start to make your own theories. And that is what is so cool about these books as far as rereads. They are ripe for rereads to come up with theories like this.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I love stuff like that.
Dude, that's so wild. So wild.
Yeah. So Komori wants to use, and we talked about this a little bit, but Komori wants to use necromancy for good to stop death completely.
Well, I need to argue that though. I need to argue that it's for good because like, and you talked about this somewhat at the beginning about this whole part, and like, it seems for good, but the ramifications of what she wants is not feasible for the world. It cannot work. It just can't. You cannot have everybody survive. There's population growth, overcrowding, all this stuff like will not work. You know what I mean? Like there's no way that it can actually happen like that. And so I agree with you in the sense like at least she thinks that it's for good. But I always have to like challenge it because I'm like, no, that cannot be good. Like people have to die. As sad as that is to say, like the society would not run the same way without death. Like death is a part of humanity. It's there. It's always been there, and it's been a part of our society forever. Any time point, forever. And so it's hard.
Absolutely.
It's hard to like be on her side with that almost. I guess.
100%. And I think that's the same conclusion that Harry comes to.
Yeah.
And I think I think it's more so that she is misguided than evil.
Yeah, exactly.
I think what she's trying to accomplish, and I think what Harry was trying to say there was that her intentions are good. She is not this cackling, half mad necromancer.
For sure.
She has her heart in the right place and wants to use this necromancy for something that is giving life versus taking life. And that is how, all the other complications aside, that is how Harry weighs good and bad. He's like, are you giving life and creating life, or are you taking life? And that is what is good and bad to him. So I think when he sees or when he hears about Komori using necromancy in this way, he's like, I'm having a hard time saying that it's evil. Basically.
No,
I feel like that's a pretty fair assessment, regardless of the things that are going to come for that. Like, yes, absolutely. If she continues with this type of necromancy, and she tries to stop death completely, then there are going to be some serious ramifications, and it's going to be really, really bad for the world. So yeah, it's a pretty complicated thing there.
No kidding.
I do like this quote from her here in that scene where she says, imagine seeing Beethoven in concert or attending a theology lecture by Martin Luther. It boggles the mind.
Yeah.
And she talks about all these other people, all these other historical figures as well. And yeah, imagine if Beethoven had 300 or 400 years to perfect his craft.
Yeah.
The kind of music he would be making nowadays would be insane.
Yeah. And Harry even mentions in that same scene, well, she says that, and he has an internal thought, and he's like, he like agrees, like that does boggle the mind. Like he's like, I can't argue with her. Like I can't, like it's hard to find an argument that can go against what she's saying. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, yeah.
So then we get, going back to Cowl, we get this little thing later on. I think it's later on in the book where we come to understand that Cowl has close ties with the Red Court of vampires, and that's who the wizards are fighting right now. And so Cowl has made some sort of deal with the Red Court to launch an offensive attack at just the right time to give him a chance to perform his Dark Hollow.
Yeah.
And I wonder what that deal was. I wonder what he was gonna repay. In order to, for them to, or I wonder if he, is a part of the council, a part of the White Council, and was able to give the Red Court insider information as to when a good attack would be, or if he just made it seem like that because he had to have the attack happen around Halloween in order so he could have time to, because Halloween's the only time he can do his Dark Hollow. So yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting. I'd really like to learn more about that.
Yes.
So what did you think of some of our other villains? I don't have too much on them, but like Gravane and Corpse Taker. What did you think of these guys?
So I would say I enjoyed Gravane, but I would say that Cassius Lucius or whatever, is that his, what is his, do you know his full name?
I think it's Cassius Lucius.
Okay. Or something like that. Same Cassius, yeah. So this guy was a Denarian for a long time, and I think this happened did it happen in Deathmask when the whole thing with him and Harry went down?
Yeah.
Okay. And so something happens, and Harry basically, the blunt of the story is Michael and Shiro are like outside of the room, and they're like, we're not gonna hurt him, we can't hurt him, it's not part of our thing. And Harry's like, I'm not like you. Like, I'm gonna fuck this dude up. And he does. He takes a baseball bat. He breaks his legs, his ankles, his knees, his wrists, everything. He breaks almost all the bones in the dude's body and leaves him there for dead. And he's like, if you ever come back here, I will kill you. If I ever see you again, I will kill you. And so the reemergence of Cassius I thought was really cool. And all the signals that he sent too. Harry gets up to the beetle, and all of a sudden all the windows are broken, and there's a baseball bat sitting in the back, a Louisville Slugger baseball bat sitting in the back. And at first you don't know, it's hard to remember that. Like, you're like, that's kind of weird. Like, whatever, the baseball bat back there and whatnot. And then eventually it gets to the point where, Cassius confronts Harry, and he's got Harry dead to rights. Like, Harry is gonna die. Like, he's stuck. He's got the manacles on, everything. He can't use his magic. He's stuck. Luckily, Butters came and saved the day. So did Mouse. But I just thought that was so cool to like bring it full circle. Yeah, bring it full circle. Exactly. And so I was super, super excited about that. And then Corpse Taker is another one that I liked a lot. Seeing her, their first meeting in box ordered books, where she kind of hits him with this very powerful mind magic, right? Like, she's a mind magic user, and he's kind of stuck, and he has to build up his mind's defenses wall and like hold on tight and use his hellfire to strengthen those walls. That's when Lashiel, can then, come and show herself. So yeah, I thought that most of all the villains in this were so cool. Like the way that they came into play, I thought was really well done and well said, and it works so well with the continuation of the story, like further on in the book and
Yeah.
whatnot.
And not only that, but how they all worked together. Like they were all disciples of
Yeah.
Kemmler,
Yep.
but they
Yep.
were also all trying to kill each other.
For sure.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
they're all like working together to get to the same goal right up until the end, where they're all going to betray each other.
Yes. Yes.
And Harry is just kind of an outsider watching their race with each other, and he's interacting with all of them.
Yeah.
And yeah, I really liked how that worked with all these different enemies. Like we do not get that very often.
Yeah.
In these Dresden Files books, is of all these people working together.
Yep.
All these enemies working together to achieve a goal. And so yeah, I really liked that about the book. Gravane was kind of hit and miss for me. I think Cassius really stole the show, like
Yeah, for
Cassius
sure.
and Cowl.
Yep.
And of course Corpse Taker there at the end, dude. That is one of the craziest.
Yes.
It wasn't exactly a twist, because Harry says, like, in his inner monologue, he knows that it's Corpse Taker.
Yeah.
But yeah, that kind of twist right there, where all of a sudden you think Lucio's dead, and then it swaps over. She does the body swap. And Harry has to convince Morgan that he is telling the truth. Dude, that is such a like heart-pounding moment.
Yes.
When Harry is trying to convince Morgan.
Yes.
And
yeah, I want to say really quick with that. So shortly after, like immediately after Corpse Taker switches bodies with Lucio, and then Corpse Taker goes down or whatever else and super hurt. The way that, and this was super crucial to me, because I had a feeling, and even the first time I read this, I had the same feeling. Like I knew something was off. The way that she was acting, she was like, Warden, get over here. Don't, she was just acting weird. And I was like, dude, there's something going on here. And then of course, Harry breaks the news and he's like, wait, that's not Lucio. Like that's Corpse Taker, and shoots her. And so, yeah, I just had to point that out, that was so well done. And I was so convinced. I was convinced of her guiltiness after it happened, because of the way that she acted and said things to Harry, and the way that she said things to other people and stuff.
Yeah. What 100%. And that thing there where Harry shoots her in the back of the head, we're going to see that haunt Harry for a while.
Yeah.
Because, he's taken lives in the middle of combat, but he's never just coldly, he executed her, is what the book says.
Yes.
It was an execution.
Yep.
And so that's the first time that Harry has ever really done something like that, like coldly killed somebody.
Yeah.
And so we're going to see this really mess with him for a few books. So Murphy in this book.
Murphy. All right, Murphy.
This whole book, Murphy is more or less absent, and she is fucking Kincaid in Hawaii.
Exactly, dude.
Man. Yeah. She there's really not much to say about her for this book.
Yeah.
But there is this one scene that I really like at the beginning, when she's telling Harry where she's going and everything. And I love the way that Jim draws not chemistry, like sexual tension between them, like both romantic, or not even sexual tension, but like romantic, romantic tension.
That's fair. Yeah.
Because she's standing there at the door, and she tells him what's going to happen. He tells her it's a bad idea. And then she talks about her plants. She's like, can you water my plants? And then right before she leaves, they just have this moment, and Jim just writes it so well. I don't have the exact quote, but Harry says, he just says, "You shouldn't go."
Yeah.
And then it says that Murphy like looks up at him. Her eyes are super deep blue, and she says, "Why?"
Yeah.
And it's just like, I just imagine
Yeah.
it being like quiet for a minute,
Yes.
you know? And it's just this moment of like tension hanging in the air of she is she is like giving Harry the opportunity to tell her that he loves her, or has feelings for her in
Yep.
some way. And he doesn't do it.
Yeah, I
And
know.
I honestly believe that when she said that, if he had told her the truth, if he had said that he had feelings for her, she would not have gone.
Yeah.
And
I
yeah.
agree. I totally do. I 100% agree.
Yeah.
And
And
I feel like that's what she was kind of hoping for in some ways.
yes,
And I think they even say
absolutely.
that further on, like, that's why she brought it up. Like she was just kind of hoping that Harry would say what he needed to say and get it off his chest to
Yeah.
stop all this, but he couldn't do it. Not yet.
Right. Not yet. And, Thomas even talks to him a little bit about this. He's like, you need to stop being such a gentleman,
Yeah.
basically. Like, he's like, what's wrong with you? Like, do you not see the signs? And yeah, I just think, it's such a tiny moment. It's such a small little moment at the beginning of the book, but it's such a credit to Jim's expertise at
Yeah.
this, that he's able to take literally like not even two sentences.
Yeah.
You shouldn't go, and why.
Yeah.
He's able to take those two things and create this vivid image and this tension.
Yep.
I just really, really loved that. I
Yes.
thought that was an excellent piece of writing
Yes.
on Jim's part.
I'm with you.
All right, cruising through the characters here, we have Rollins. Do you remember this guy from later in the series?
I do. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, Rollins is one of my favorite characters in the next book, Proven Guilty, because he
Yep.
he comes up again. He doesn't get nearly enough
Yeah.
screen time, I think. I really, really like Rollins. He is a kind of a smartass. He's this cop that is very close with Murphy,
Yep.
and he has seen some stuff.
Yeah.
He has
Yeah.
seen some weird stuff. Do you remember what he saw in what he was saying he saw in this
For
book?
sure. Yeah. So, I mean, he was a beat cop, I think, at the time, and he went into an alley and there was something attacking a girl, and he understood that he was powerless. I think he tried to shoot at it. He emptied a clip into it or something, and nothing happened. And he was
Right.
scared, terrified. And then all of a sudden, Murphy's dad comes up behind him with a shotgun loaded with rock salt and
Yeah.
kills the thing. And it catches on fire when the sunlight comes out and whatnot. And that's what he tells Harry, because Rollins.
Yeah.
I also love Rollins, and he's very much aware of the supernatural. He's not like the 99%. He's like, he understands that there are things that he cannot comprehend, and he accepts it, which most people don't. And so that's why he's kind of beholden to Murphy, which and then is
Yeah.
beholden to Harry, because Harry helps
By
Murphy out a lot.
proxy.
Yeah, by
Yeah.
proxy, exactly.
Yeah. I really like his character. I love how he voices his objections, and we'll see this more in the next book, more so than this book. But he voices his objections, and he makes it clear like what he does and doesn't think Harry should
Yeah,
do. But in the end, he is loyal to Harry,
yeah. And
and
so, oh,
he is
go
very
ahead.
much on Harry's side, I
Yep.
guess.
I just thought of a perfect scene to kind of portray that. It's when Harry's at the National Field Museum or whatever the museum is there, and there was the murder, the professor, whatever, was brutally murdered, and he's trying to figure out what's going on. And so he sneaks past a couple cops, he gets down there, and he makes it to the entryway to the room where stuff happened, and I think he uses his sight and trying to look for energies and whatnot. And then Rollins comes up behind him, and Harry's like, I haven't gone in there yet. And Rollins is like, yeah, well, you're not in cuffs, so that makes sense. Like, he's like, I haven't arrested you yet, so I know you're not in there type thing. Which
Right.
just goes to show, like, most cops would be like, you got to get out of here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you cannot be in here. And so, yeah, I don't know. That just popped up in my head.
And Roland talks to him about the crime scene.
Yeah,
And he gives him some more info.
Yep.
And so he's very pro Harry, and not in a like we're best friends kind of way, but in like he's like I know, yeah, exactly. He's like, I know who you are, and I know what you do and what you stand for, and I'm for that.
Yeah.
And so that's really what I like about Rollins' character. Plus, he is so funny. I cannot wait, dude. I cannot wait to talk about some of his quotes from the next book, because he has some really, really funny lines from the next book.
Yes.
And real quick before we move on from that, this is also a perfect example of, throughout the series so far, I think I noticed it the most on this reread. We're getting little snippets of Murphy's dad.
Yeah.
And in the last book we find out that I think it's the last book where in Blood Rights we find out that he was part of something called the
Black Cat
Files.
Files.
Yeah. And so we're getting all this little tiny info dumps about him. And then we find out in this one that, he was the one that kind of came to Rollins' rescue, and he loaded this, vampire or whatever up with rock salt, and then showed Rollins how to burn it in the sunlight.
Yeah.
And so I just love all these little tiny things. We also get another one in this book where Mortimer Lindquist, or Mortimer Lindquist, is he's Harry's about to leave, and Harry's like, I have a lady who's in trouble, like she's gonna be screwed. And right before Mortimer's kicking him out, and right before Harry leaves, Mort is like, who's the girl? And he's like, Karen Murphy. And Mortimer is instantly like, okay, I'll help. And Harry's like, why? And Mortimer's like, I know her dad. We also meet Lucio and Ramirez in this book. In this book, Ramirez is a brand new warden. He's, just a kid in this book, which is kind of funny to see.
Yeah.
But he has no problem cutting Gravaine's throat and calmly executes him with a bullet to the head. I had totally forgotten about that. And like the book described it, whereas like Ramirez like cut his throat, and then when he fell over, he just like calmly stepped over him and shot him in the head.
Yeah.
And I'm like, damn, Ramirez is like really, really a badass.
Yep.
I'm looking forward to how he plays into a White Knight later on. All right, we're going to wrap it up there. Thank you everyone for watching, and don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons to keep up with all this amazing content we have on the way. You can also follow us on Twitter at Files Fantasy and interact with us here in the comments on YouTube. We will see you in the next installment of Deadbeat, where we continue with more topics relating to the book. Until next time, time is a river, life is a journey, and the door is ajar.
Love it.